56 years ago today, Allied forces...
Byron Henderson, thank you for joining us for the dedication of the only national memorial to honor the men who fought and died on D-Day. This National D-Day Museum is dedicated to the nearly 5,000 American military personnel who lost their lives on the French coastline in a brave and successful effort to free Europe from Nazi control 56 years ago today. But this museum is about much more than that heroic day on the beach. It's also about the men and women on foreign soil and right here at home who came together as the world around them threatened to fall apart. More than 5,000 veterans of World War II are here to walk through the history they helped create. Young soldiers are here to honor the old with a military parade through the streets of New Orleans. Historians and musicians have come to pay tribute to them in voice and in song. This National D-Day Museum is about much more than artifacts and relics of a world at war. It also collects memories, good and bad, of a time the entire country united behind a just cause.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished veterans and honored guests from home and abroad, today is a day we have long awaited. 15 years ago, the idea for this museum was born in Steve Ambrose's backyard. Today, $22 million later, here we are with a state-of-the-art facility. 10,000 honorees whose names are inscribed on the museum bricks that helped pave the road to victory, along with generous donors, the state of Louisiana, the United States government. For this grand opening occasion, more than 10,000 veterans have joined to help us dedicate the only museum in America built in their honor. We've come a long way.
We come to dedicate, yes, bricks and mortar and memorabilia and a facility. But I think, more importantly, we come as the successor generations to salute a great generation. A generation that is great for purpose, for bravery, and for valor. The generation that crushed Hitler and fascism. The combat soldiers who braved the elements, who as young men fought great battles, who stared down defeat and won a great war. We salute all of our allies for the support that they gave us in a great challenge for humanity. And very importantly, as this generation, I think today, in this city, we uncover this city's great link to the D-Day invasion, that being the Higgins Boat Factory and the wonderful creative genius of Andrew Jackson Higgins.
Whereas it has been said that D-Day was a day that made all future days possible, and whereas the museum will honor Andrew Jackson Higgins, who is credited by General Dwight D. Eisenhower as a man that won the war for us, and whereas the United States is the only allied nation which does not have an active museum, or didn't, to honor the veterans of World War II and the amphibious D-Day invasions, and whereas it is the express wish of the citizens of this great state of Louisiana to publicly honor and praise the brave, selfless patriots who have made our freedom possible. Therefore, I do hereby declare the opening of the National D-Day Museum in New Orleans, Louisiana on June the 6th, 2000 as a day of remembrance and proclaim the week of June the 6th, 2000 as National D-Day Museum Week in the state of Louisiana. And I've got the proclamation here, and I think I'll give it to Mr. Ambrose.
But the real dignitaries, they're sitting right in front of me, and they're scattered all through this audience. The men and women of the Second World War and what they've done for us. Now, 56 years ago on this day, the word began to spread across the United States as the sun rose in New York and finally got out to San Francisco, that this was it. D-Day was here. Every family in America had a son or a husband or a brother or an uncle or a neighbor who was in England. They didn't know if they were going in on the first wave or the fifth wave, or if they were going in on D+1 or D+5, or if it would be D plus a month before they went in, but they knew that every one of them was going to go into battle.
For every hope that you entertain, you have an obligation you must fulfill. For every good that you wish to achieve, you must sacrifice your comfort and your ease. There is nothing for nothing any longer.
Following the ribbon cutting, the tens of thousands of people assembled for the museum dedication witnessed the largest military parade seen on American soil since the end of World War II. The glowing tribute brings tears to the eyes of these veterans who remember their glory days on the battlefields of Europe, North Africa, and the South Pacific.
Here in New Orleans.
From across the Atlantic, the French Color Guard, representing the French Navy, is here to join the celebration. Some of D-Day's most savage fighting took place on the beach in the French province of Normandy. The World War II veterans themselves take part in the parade.
And this, riding in this truck are veterans from the Landing Craft Infantry Group, Landing Craft Infantry, or LCIs, British Infantry.
And Great Britain heard from a trip across the pond to remember a shared struggle.
Mechanical engineers from Great Britain.
Eight surviving Medal of Honor winners from D-Day share the honor of Parade Grand Marshal. It's been 56 years, but it's an honor worth waiting for. This trip is a lot easier than the one made across the beach in 1944.
World War II veterans.
Old times and recent history meet as the crowd's delight to this costumed fife and drum corps. It wasn't just the Army, the Navy, and the Marines. The Coast Guard was also there on D-Day. The steely determination in the eyes of these young soldiers can't hide the admiration they feel for the ones who went before.
Louisiana Army National Guard here in New Orleans. And now, approaching the grandstand, Sole Grand Marshal, Army Staff Sergeant Walter D. Heller, earned the Medal of Honor during actions against enemy German forces near New Orleans, France. June 1978.
Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and Coast Guard, it's an overdue chance to say thank you to this greatest generation. After the parade, the celebration continues at the New Orleans Sports Arena. The veterans, their families and loved ones, and thousands of people who just want to say thanks listen to tributes from such dignitaries as historian Stephen Ambrose and filmmakers Steven Spielberg and Tom Hanks, whose film Saving Private Ryan brought new and deserved attention to the struggle of World War II. Author and NBC News anchor Tom Brokaw is master of ceremonies.
Thank you all very much, distinguished guests here on the stage, but especially here in this great city, the great state of Louisiana. It's a rare privilege for me to be with so many members of the greatest generation. Just as important, it lifts my spirits to look out into this crowd and know that there are other generations as well assembled here today who want to lay claim to the title, the greatest generation, for their own age group. They've come to listen and to be inspired. "56 years ago today, at this hour, the first day of the invasion that would turn the course of the war was nearing its end. The long road to victory had established a beachhead. What a relief it is that 56 years later, the battles we have are the battles of the bands here in this great arena. The rockets that we see are the toy rockets that accompany our national anthem. We're here today to honor the opening of a museum that was envisioned by America's great historian, Dr. Stephen Ambrose, from whom you'll be hearing later. He has said in his life of exceptional accomplishment, this is the one that gives him the greatest pride. For the D-Day Museum celebrates not just a battle, but the American spirit, teamwork, courage, optimism, and sacrifice. This is a unique and special museum for many reasons. It's the only museum in the United States that's dedicated to the amphibious invasions during World War II, not just in Normandy, but all the D-Days of World War II, in Europe and North Africa and Sicily and the Pacific. But I'd like for you this afternoon to remember that we come here with somber memories, but to celebrate life. On D-Day, at the end of it, more than 2,000 young Americans have been killed on those bloody beaches. It's important for us to remember that while they are gone, that the D-Day Museum is like a great heart in a great city, pumping out life to all the body parts of America, young and old, east and west, north and south, people of all color. A great heart of a great generation, giving life to succeeding generations. I'd like to begin our program by introducing a friend of mine, a man who was there that day. He was the 2nd Ranger Battalion. He was one of the boys of Punt de Hoc. And when he got atop those cliffs, he found empty pillboxes. But this sergeant took his man and began thinking quickly, ran to some of the guns hidden in the hedgerows that were trained on other beaches. He ran to the guns and he set off the grenades and the recoil and traversing mechanisms, and he disabled those big guns and saved an untold number of lives on other beaches. He bashed in the sights of the 3rd gun, facing grave danger for himself, many of the men in his invasion. The sergeant, who had been wounded as he landed and continued his mission, returned to his position and could not believe the men that he saw, his fellow Rangers who were down in the dirt, caked with their own blood and dead. He returned to this country to become a lawyer and a great citizen. He's still Ranger tough, ladies and gentlemen. Sergeant Len Bud Lomell. Bud.
Million people were innocently killed in World War II by many accounts that I have read in my research. There may have been more, but you all know there are hundreds of millions of people all over this planet that are murdered, get killed, they die as a result of what people call war. So if this museum can help the future generations to see war as I see it, and they can go forth and be our leaders and in some way stop it and find a peaceful way to resolve their disputes. Thank you.
Thank you, Bud. Our next speaker was the oldest captain to land on Omaha Beach, and certainly the best paid. What better choice to speak here today, to speak to us the words of the man who documented the lives of the fighting men. He is no less than the emblematic American of his time, on the screen and off. He's the son every mother would like to have, the young man every father would like to marry his daughter, the neighbor or the pal we'd all like to have, knowing he'd let us borrow his lawnmower or his barbecue, or maybe even his airplane. Ladies and gentlemen, Tom Hanks.
The following was written 56 years ago by a newspaper correspondent who was popular at the time. I took a long walk along the historic coast of Normandy in the country of France. It was a lovely day for strolling along the seashore. Men were sleeping on the sand, some of them sleeping forever. Men were floating in the water, but they didn't know they were in water, for they were dead. I walked for 1.5 miles along the water's edge of our many-miled invasion beach. You wanted to walk slowly, for the detail on that beach was infinite. The wreckage was vast and startling. The awful waste and destruction of war, even aside from the loss of human life, has always been one of its outstanding features to those who are in it. Anything and everything is expendable, and we did expend on our beachhead in Normandy during those first few hours. For a mile out from the beach, there were scores of tanks and trucks and boats that you could no longer see, for they were at the bottom of the water. Most of their crews were lost. On the beach itself, high and dry, were all kinds of wrecked vehicles. There were tanks that had only just made the beach before being knocked out. There were jeeps that had burned to a dull gray. There were LCTs turned completely upside down and lying on their backs, and how they got that way, I don't know. But there is another and more human litter. It extends in a thin little line, just like a high water mark for miles along the beach. This is the strewn personal gear that will never be needed again, of those who fought and died to give us our entrance into Europe. Here in a jumbled row for mile on mile are soldiers' packs. Here are socks and shoe polish, sewing kits, diaries, Bibles, and hand grenades. Here are the toothbrushes and razors, and snapshots of families back home staring up at you from the sand. Here are pocket books, metal mirrors, extra trousers, and bloody, abandoned shoes. I picked up a pocket Bible with the soldier's name on it and put it in my pocket. I carried it half a mile or so and then put it back down on the beach. I don't know why I picked it up or why I put it back down. Two of the most dominant items in the beach refuse are cigarettes and writing paper. Each soldier was issued a carton of cigarettes just before he started. Today, these cartons by the thousand, water-soaked and spilled out, mark the line of our first savage blow. Writing paper and airmail envelopes come second. The boys had intended to do a lot of writing in France, letters that would have filled those blank, abandoned pages. The strong, swirling tides of the Normandy coastline shift the contours of the sandy beach as they move in and out. They carry soldiers' bodies out to sea, and later they return them. They cover the corpses of heroes with sand, and in their whims, they uncover them. As I plowed out over the wet sand on the beach on that first day ashore, I walked around what seemed to be a couple of pieces of driftwood sticking out of the sand. But they weren't driftwood. They were a soldier's 2 feet. He was completely covered by the shifting sands except for his feet. The toes of his GI shoes pointed toward the land he had come so far to see and which he saw so briefly. Scripps Howard Wire copy, June of 1944, by the great Ernie Pyle.
People sometimes ask me if I know Tom Hanks, and I say, well, I've come to know him some. And then they always invariably ask, is he as nice as he seems to be on the screen? And I lean closer and I say, well, I've got a little secret to tell you. It's hard to believe, but he's even nicer than he appears on the screen. And his great friend and his artistic partner is our next speaker, a man who turned his childhood fantasies into a brilliant career in the quintessential American art form, the movies. His credits will run on long after his career and his working days are over. 500 years from now and beyond, students will be looking with a sense of awe on 2 films that he made that reminded us of all of what we went through in the 20th century. Schindler's List and Private Ryan. With those films, he reminds us of the inhumanity in the heart of Western civilization and the courage and heroism of ordinary people. He honors his father and all of us. He's a great artist, but he's also a great humanitarian, a great father. Ladies and gentlemen, Steven Spielberg.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be with all of you today. It's an honor and a privilege for me to be here as part of an event where the veterans of the Second World War and the city of New Orleans are making history right now. I want to thank Stephen Ambrose and Nick Mueller for their vision and for giving me the opportunity to join them and so many more to ensure that this and future generations will never forget what happened before, during, and after D-Day. Now, every new generation thinks the last one was too square or too straight, or as my kids put it to me, kind of boring. Today, that we eat, we move, we play, we work, and we communicate at the speed of light. The weekly magazines show us what is in style this month that will be out of style next month. We are burdened, more than blessed, with an overabundance of information. My kids still dream, but their dreams change from week to week. What they want now and can't have is already obsolete by the time they're old enough to get it. Something new is always waiting just around the next corner. In 1940, the corners were a lot further apart. The veterans of World War II, whom we honor here today, are from less complicated yet harder times. They were there when the world exploded. They were there to fight for the pieces, to fight for the right to put the pieces back together again. I know this because it is what my father told me. It is the history he has honored me with, and it's the history I believe in, and the same history I try to teach my own children. But it took making a film about World War II to get my kids interested in hearing what their granddad had to say about his life and his times. Sometimes it takes a story to beget stories. I think that without a world war to force my generation into defining itself, the baby boomers have instead been drifting along, redefining themselves every few years through music and fashion and popular culture and technology. Unless we're united in our war against cancer and AIDS, or unless we are, as we were under JFK and Martin Luther King, united in our fight for civil rights, then we have been living more for ourselves, more for our own individuality, fighting to achieve our 15 minutes of fame, as Andy Warhol once noted. My dad's generation, the greatest generation, as Tom Brokaw calls it, wasn't the me generation, it was the us generation. It was a generation of boys who became men, of girls who became women, who fought for each other, for God and country and the soul of our nation. They fought for the big picture. They fought for the big picture selflessly, and in so doing, they saved the whole world and made my generation a possibility. Making Saving Private Ryan was my way of taking part in the greatest generation, of going backwards through time to do my part for the big picture, to make my father proud, to make the baby boomers proud of their fathers, to make Generation X proud of their grandfathers, to show that democracy comes at a high cost, that the stranger next to you in a foxhole or in your life is not a stranger at all, but a human force worth living for, fighting for, and dying for. That the world isn't just a better place because of what you veterans have done for us in the 20th century, but that the world is a place at all because you fought and sacrificed to save it for your children and for mine. We must celebrate you not every June 6th, not just on Veterans Day. We must celebrate you every day. We must keep you in our prayers all the time. And we have to strive to earn your respect as we grow up in freedom at the dawn of the new millennium, thanks to you. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, the U.S. Army 82nd Airborne All-American Chorus.
We do hail out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina, which is home of the Airborne, and the 82nd Airborne Division is America's Guard of Honor. On behalf of the Commanding General, Major General McNeil, and all the paratroopers of the division, I would like to say it is our pleasure to be here. For our first selection this afternoon, we'd like to do a song that describes how military life was like for the soldier in World War II. It is entitled, "This is the Army, Mr. Jones."
This is the Army, Mr. Jones. No private rooms or telephones. You've had your breakfast in bed before, but you won't have it there anymore. This is the Army, Mr. Green. We like the barracks nice and clean. You've had a housemaid to clean your floor, but she won't help you out anymore. Do what the buglers command. They're in the Army and not in a band. This is the Army, Mr. Brown. You and your baby went to town. She had you worried, but this is war, and she won't worry you anymore.
A bunch of frightened rookies were listening filled with awe. They listened while their sergeant was laying down the law.
They stood there at attention, their faces turning red. The sergeant looked them over, and this is what he said.
This is the Army, Mr. Jones.
This is the Army, Mr. Jones. No private rooms or telephones.
You had
in bed before, but you won't have it there anymore.
This is the Army, Mr. Green.
This is the Army, Mr. Green.
Like the barracks nice and clean.
We like the barracks nice and clean.
Had a housemaid
to clean your floor, but she won't help you out anymore. Do what the buglers command. They're in the Army and not in a band.
This is the Army, Mr. Brown.
This is the Army, Mr. Brown.
You and
your baby went to town. But this is war,
and she won't
worry you anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you. On behalf of the All-American Chorus, I would like to say it was our pleasure to be here. For our next and final selection, we'd like to do a song that was made famous by country and western singer Lee Greenwood. It was made quite popular during Operation Desert Shield and Desert Storm. It is entitled God Bless USA. Thank you. Have a nice day.
If tomorrow all the things were gone I'd worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife, I thank my lucky stars to be living here today, 'cause the flag still stands for freedom and they can't take that away.
That I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died who gave that right to me. And I'll gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. Love this land, God bless the USA.
From the lakes of Minnesota to the hills of Tennessee, across the plains of Texas, from sea to shining sea, from Detroit down to Houston and New York to LA, there is pride in every American's heart. This time we stand and say
that I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the man who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. Love this land, God bless the USA.
Ladies and gentlemen, the 82nd Airborne Division's All-American
Airborne!
Thank you.
Thank you. Here we go, all the way. Gotta be rough and tough. Bo dilly, have you heard? Bo dilly, have you heard? We're gonna jump from a big iron bird. We're gonna jump from a big iron bird. Stand up, hook up, shuffle to the door. Stand up, hook up, shuffle to the door. And we'll leap right out and count to 4. Leap right out and count to 4. If my main don't open wide, if my main don't open wide, I've got a reserve by my side. I've got a reserve by my side. Hey. Here we go, all the way. Gotta be rough and tough. Rough and tough. Hey-la-di-la-di-la-di. Hey-la-di-la-di-lo. Hey-la-di-la-di-la-di. Hey-la-di-la-di-lo. Well, the GI grits and the GI green. Hey-la-di-la-di-lo. We're so proud we didn't join the Marine. Hey-la-di-la-di-lo. Well, the GI grits and the GI gravy. Hey-la-di-la-di-lo. We're so proud we didn't join the Navy. Here we go, all the way, every day, all the way. Here we go, all the way, every day, all the way. Airborne. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your evening.
1945, the worst year in the world's history. More people killed than any other year. More buildings destroyed, more fires. To the average civilian, seeing a squad of teenagers in uniform with weapons struck terror into their hearts. Whether it was a squad of Russians in Berlin or Leipzig or Dresden or in Warsaw, or a squad of Germans in Holland or in Norway, or a squad of Japanese in Korea or in China or in the Philippines, that squad of teenage boys meant to those civilians for certain rape, pillage, looting, wanton destruction, senseless murder. There was an exception. And that was a squad of GIs, teenagers in uniform carrying weapons. And around the world, the sight of those GIs brought to every civilian's face the biggest smile you ever saw on people's face. Because those GIs meant candy, sea rations, cigarettes, and freedom. We had sent the best of our young men halfway around the world in both directions, not to conquer, not to terrorize, but to liberate.
I would define hero as being a person that when the cards are down, when in spite of the fact that they're scared to death, that they're going to somehow perform at a sacrifice which they know consciously are making. In other words, it's my life, my livelihood that I'm putting at stake for the good of a comrade or the common good of others.
Anybody who tells you they weren't afraid in the war is either lying or they're not playing with a full deck. Fear is not the question, really. The question is, how did you handle fear? And generally speaking, all of our troops, whether they were pilots, submariners, guys on the ground, paratroopers, whatever, they handle fear very well. There's nothing to be ashamed of about being afraid.
Just was amazed at how much I could stand and how much those around me could stand in the way of loss of sleep, loss of rest, and still carry on and do a job.
Well, I often think of these buddies of mine that were killed because of their age. Most of them think they didn't get a chance to live.
Going into your first combat is entirely different than going into your second combat mission. And your second combat mission, you've learned the hard way that the name of the game is to win that battle and to try to get through it alive and to look out for the man on your right and the man on your left, because he's very important and he thinks the same way you do.
What I enjoyed a lot about being in the Army was not the war, but being there when it was going on is a part of I say a happy memory, because the men who lived together and shared everything, and we really loved each other, and we got along. It was not like regular friendships.
If a war can have a purpose, and that one did, then everybody understood that. Not only the guys in the combat, but the support troops, the civilians back home who were working in plants, and those who weren't, but were supporting the war effort in every way they could. They understood that this was like the shootout at the OK Corral. It's now or it's going to be over for us.
There's much of it that I felt that should be discussed, and I particularly now feel that the general public should be apprised of what so many did, so many contributors. I think the museum is just a wonderful thing.
Education is what it's all about. Dialogue is the bottom line. What we did should be the last resort. There's a lot of fellows my age, they just don't like to talk about this, and I understand that and I respect that. But I think it's incumbent upon us to get the message out there so that the future generations will come to realize that war is hell.
Grandfather that is now about in his 70s, and he was stationed on a cruiser fighting against the Japanese.
I had a grandfather that fought in World War II and was stationed in Okinawa.
I have a grandfather who was in World War II, and he flew the hump with gasoline.
My hero is my grandfather because it makes me feel proud that know that he's very patriotic and help save the country and make everybody free.
My heroes are the veterans because they help make me here today. I'll say thank you because they made me proud to be an American.
We owe them our lives because the ones that did live, they put their lives on the line for us, and they did this on their country's behalf, which, you know, is all part of us. So we owe them the utmost appreciation because they did the unthinkable.
Many of them paid the ultimate price for the world's freedom.
They're not here to see the results of their efforts. If those people hadn't died for what they believed in, you know, we wouldn't be here today.
They created our American dream. They made it what it is today for us. It's not something that you can pass off with a thank you or a medal or anything like that. It's far deeper.
The kind of freedom and values and democracy that we as Americans value was preserved in a large part due to the sacrifices that they made.
I don't think that there are really words to describe our gratitude to them. There's nothing that we can really do for them to repay them for what they've done. They've done so much for our society.
They've done something, they've gone through something that I don't think any of us could imagine ourselves doing, put ourselves in that position. It's just amazing. You have nothing but respect for them.
We will never forget their sacrifices, and we'll never let our children forget them either.
I would just like to say thank you, because if it wasn't for them, who knows where we would have been if they hadn't gone and fought and died for us. Just thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the New Orleans Children's Chorus singing God Bless America, accompanied by Navy Band New Orleans. We invite you to join in and sing along.
The National D-Day Museum in New Orleans is now officially open for all future ages. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here.
Our living links to this amazing part of our history will not be with us forever. It has been nearly 60 years since the veterans of World War II saved the world in the streets of Europe, on the sands of North Africa, and in the waters of the South Pacific. They took their responsibilities very seriously and made their sacrifices without hesitation. We can repay that commitment by simply promising to remember. Museums such as this one can help this generation and the ones to follow to do just that. You can visit the National D-Day Museum from 9 to 5, 7 days a week, right here in downtown New Orleans. I'm Byron Henderson. For all of us here at LPB, good night.
For a copy of LPB's coverage of the National D-Day Museum's opening celebration, call 1-800-973-7246. Or send a $30 donation to Louisiana Public Broadcasting, 7733 Perkins Road, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, 70810.